Hey, you cool cats and kittens. It's Miss Yabut here. Wow, great job on working on all of our open ended questions on yesterday's exit ticket, friends. Before we jump into chapters 4 and 5 of Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes, we have a couple of announcements. ELA Masters, make sure that you work on Lexia for 30 minutes today. You need 150 minutes by tomorrow, so please make sure that you log on today after our lesson. And as a reminder, today we have office hours from 2:45 to 4 o'clock, so make sure that you attend to get those 3 Vista virtual points. I saw in Miss Rodriguez's office hours yesterday that she had some pretty cool glasses on. You guys don't want to miss that. ELA Masters, I am so excited to get to share with you today chapters 4 and 5 of Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes. Yesterday, we read a nonfiction text article called Leukemia that will help us understand what happens for the rest of the book. Remember that as good readers, whenever we read any historical fiction text, we need to ask ourselves these questions. How is the setting important to the plot of the story? So we know by now that the setting is where in Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes? Yes, it's in Hiroshima, Japan in 1954, 9 years after the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. I also want to ask myself, what can stories teach readers about the past? We already learned a lot about what leukemia treatment was like in the 1950s. I now know that while I'm reading my historical fiction text today, I'm going to be thinking about the characters' perspectives to help me understand what it was like back then. Finally, friends, as good readers, I need to be able to distinguish what is fact from what is fiction while reading my historical fiction text. Scholars, before we move on, let's review what historical fiction is. Remember that I can find that under classwork. Historical fiction is an imaginative story that takes place in the historical past and may have some real events or people. Your turn. Historical fiction is an Great job, friends. So, really quick, is Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes a narrative text or a nonfiction text? Narrative or nonfiction? Show me. Yes, duh, we know that by now. Historical fiction is a narrative text. We know that it comes from the author's imagination. Sadako Sasaki was a real girl. She was just a baby when the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima, and when we meet her in this book, she's about 11 years old. But her thoughts and feelings all are make believe. They come from the author's imagination. So, this is still a narrative make believe text. If you need to, pause your video and write that in now. Good. Scholars, we are reading Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes. So I know now that what genre of text is that? Historical fiction or info text? Tell me. Right. This is historical fiction. Pay attention. This will be a question on your exit ticket. What genre of text are we reading today? Historical fiction. Good. Let's review the characteristics of historical fiction. First, the setting is important. You told me that the setting is in Hiroshima in 1954 in Japan. Our second characteristic is that this text is often focused on real issues of the time and characters' perspective of them. Yesterday, we read about a real issue called leukemia. And many children were getting this cancer, especially in the 1950s in Japan. Today, we'll read more about characters' perspective of that disease. Our third characteristic is that some values, perspectives, and living conditions are different from today. Scholars, remember, as good readers, we often read a nonfiction text before we read the fiction text because it builds our schema about the setting and important people and events of the time. And this helps us better understand the setting and the characters in the fiction text. Friends, can you remind me, what did we build our schema about yesterday? Tell me. Right. We learned about a cancer of the blood called leukemia. After we read our text, we came up with this main idea that many children who have cancer have a blood cancer called leukemia, and that it is caused by genetic and environmental risk factors like exposure to chemicals. So that means that you can get leukemia either from something that you're born with, or it could just be caused by things around you, the air, or something that is poisonous or toxic. Scholars, we would not have understood our text today if we didn't first build our schema about this disease. So it's so important that good readers read nonfiction first. Friends, today we are going to be reading chapters 4 and 5 of Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes. And we had a few questions to double check our understanding from yesterday's exit ticket. Scholars, some of us got a little bit tricked again yesterday. Real facts is not a genre. Real facts is not a genre. Real facts describes what is in the genre nonfiction, informational text. So the genre of the text that we read yesterday, leukemia, is nonfiction. It is not real facts. Real facts is not a genre. I ask you that there are many different causes of leukemia that we learned about yesterday. What do you think is causing the leukemia affecting people living in Hiroshima during the setting of Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes? One scholar said that this leukemia was caused by things that were around you. I know because in the heading, when we read our text yesterday, it said this could mean something you are born with or it can be caused by the thing around you. Thinking about what I remember in the details from my text, I wonder what those things are. This scholar said this leukemia could have been caused by the atomic bomb radiation. I know because in the text, leukemia, it says one of the cause for that sickness is exposure to certain chemicals. Friends, in chapter 1, we learned briefly that in the air in Hiroshima was a lot of radiation, and that is a very poisonous and toxic waste from the atomic bomb. So I think that this scholar might be onto something, is that the chemicals in that radiation could have caused the leukemia that people in Hiroshima were contracting. I also ask you that Sadako is living in 1954. We know that from our setting. Did you think there was chemotherapy available then to treat people with leukemia? Remember that chemotherapy is the medicine that is now used to treat leukemia. And today, most children with leukemia will be free of the disease, although it is possible for it to come back. This scholar said there is no chemotherapy available because in 1954, to treat people, it was not invented yet. I seem to remember from my schema yesterday that it said in the 1950s, there were not as many drugs available to cure cancer. Just like the scholar said, only 33% of people who had leukemia in the 1950s survived. Since Sadako is living in 1954, it doesn't sound like people during this time had access to chemotherapy or that it even had been invented yet. I asked you yesterday, friends, to rewrite our predictions from Tuesday. Why do you think Sadako is having dizzy spells? Many of us on Tuesday wrote something like this scholar did. I predict that Sadako is having dizzy spells because she's scared to let her parents down and she's scared her legs won't work and she really wants to do good in this race to have the junior high team want her to run with them. So, a lot of us predicted this on Tuesday. Yesterday, a scholar predicted that Sadako is having dizzy spells because she might have leukemia. And she is one of the symptoms of leukemia, which is dizziness. And she was living in Hiroshima after the bomb was dropped. I came to this conclusion because in today's text, it said dizziness was a symptom of leukemia. Friends, which prediction do you think you agree with? One or two? Show me. Hmm. Scholars, if that second scholar is correct in their prediction, if Sadako does indeed have cancer, do you think that she'll be cured? This scholar said, I'm unsure if she'll be cured because sometimes people can get cured and sometimes they can't. And cancer is a very unpredictable disease. And it said, surely in the text, that once you have had no signs of leukemia for 5 years, a person could be cured. However, it could still come back. This scholar said, I predict Sadako will be cured because in paragraph 6, we now have many drugs to kill cancer cells. Yes, that is what chemotherapy does. And we do know from our schema that today, luckily, the chances for a cure are very good with leukemia because chemotherapy is such an effective treatment. But in this scholar's prediction, they said, I predict Sadako is not going to be cured because in the 1950, which is past 1945, they still did not have a cure. That's right. I remember that from the text that I read yesterday. And I also know from my schema that Sadako is living in 1954. Oops. Today, treatment uses chemotherapy, which uses strong drugs to kill cancer cells. And in the 1950s, there were not as many drugs available to cure cancer, and only 33% of the patients survived. ELA Masters, which prediction do you think you agree with the most? One, two, or three? Tell me. We'll certainly learn more today in chapters 4 and 5. Remember, scholars, that as good readers, I need to make sure that I am distinguishing fact from fiction while I read. So I have to ask myself, is this time, place, and important people or events real things from history? If so, this is fact. Good. Let's write that in our Google form. Real things from history are facts. If you need to, pause your video to type that in now. Good. I also need to ask myself, which parts of the story are coming from the author's imagination, especially Sadako's thoughts, feelings, actions, or dialogue? This would be considered fiction. Go ahead and pause your video if you need to type that in now. And when you're finished, you can go ahead and click Next to continue.